Today we have a special guest who is the host of Healthy Beyond 40 here with us today to give us some amazing insights on how to nourish our bodies and get healthy so that we can feel better. Now is the time to jump in and improve our health before the holidays. So I am super excited to have her on the show today and to learn more from her. You are not going to want to miss this. Hey parents, welcome to Fulfillment Therapy. Do you want to raise your kids better and have a stronger marriage? Are you up late at night researching marriage and parenting tools and self-care tips? Do you start each day hoping for deeper connections and less chaos, but it ends with family arguments and going 12 different directions again? My name's Kendra, wife, mom, therapist, and growth enthusiast. It wasn't until I discovered how to fulfill my unmet needs that I was finally able to show up as my best self as a spouse and parent. I realized that by meeting my needs, I could more fully meet the needs of my family with more energy and less resentment. In this podcast, I teach parents skills like boundary setting, prioritizing personal needs, communication, and claiming ownership. Just like my clients, you'll be shocked by the improvement in your marriage, parenting, and personal life when you focus on fulfilling your important, unmet needs. Ready to prioritize yourself so you can quit mentally throat punching people? Then grab those earbuds and head outside, and let's walk and talk. Today, we have a special guest, Michelle Reichman. She is a personal trainer, a yoga teacher, a health coach, and she has her doctorate in physical therapy. She's also the host of Healthy Beyond 40, and she helps women nourish their bodies, get healthy, and optimize their metabolism so they can feel better. So we're really excited to have you on the show today, Michelle. Thank you for coming on. And do you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself beyond what I just said?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So I'm also a mom of four. My kids range from 7 to 17 right now. I'm also a military spouse. So we are in the West right now, but we are from the Midwest. And I'm just really passionate about helping other women really find sustainable ways to get healthy. We live in such a diet culture world that we get really far from our body and knowing what our body needs. And I love to help women get back to that place of nourishing their body.
I'm excited to talk to you about this because this has been on my mind quite a bit, especially I know a lot of my clients, I'm actually a personal trainer too, by the way, but a lot of my mental health clients, because I'm also a therapist, they talk about how the summer is kind of chaotic. You kind of get out of good habits, and then getting into the school year, you just desire to have more structure, improve your health right before the holidays. So definitely on people's minds, definitely something that we want to talk about, and that I've been navigating myself too, because I hate that shame culture that is so prevalent and how we're so hyper-focused on weight. And so I'm excited to pick your brain, excited to have you on here. Also, I am a mama of four as well, and my oldest is 17, so that's pretty exciting. How old are your other kids?
They are 7, 12, and 13. So the three youngest are boys and the oldest is a girl. So she has one more year at home, then off to college.
Oh, that's so awesome. Yeah, we're hitting all of that part where we apply for colleges for next year and all of those things. So similar things going on. And you're doing all of this while podcasting. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more about what you do to help people. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions? And
Sure, go ahead.
All right. Well, one of my questions is, what do you do or what do you tell your clients when they feel super overwhelmed and that they don't want to do another thing that's just a fad? Like, where do they start?
Yeah, start small. And I think that's where everyone gets so thrown off when we live in a culture of diets or more extreme exercise. A lot of people get into that all or nothing mindset. It's like, I have to be following this diet or I'm not doing anything and not fueling my body at all and eating junk food. And we take these extremes, but what if we can start to take that smaller approach where it doesn't flag an alarm system in our brain? Can we just start with 5 minutes of exercise? Because that might seem more manageable. Or maybe for someone, it's actually like 1 minute that they're going to start with and then eventually build to that point. But we really have to start small, because the goal, hopefully for people, is not just to drop weight or, get to a certain size for someone's wedding or something like that. But how can we actually get sustainable health that we can grow with and that can stay with us, that our kids can look at us and be like, well, I can do that too. I don't have to eat all these weird things, or I don't have to go out for these super long runs or do things like that. How can we make it more sustainable for us and for our kids as they are watching us? So we can start small. And really, when it comes to, I'm a big fan of strength training, we can start small. And especially if someone hasn't exercised or strength trained in a long time, if they do a 30-minute strength training session, it's going to be too much for their body. They're going to get super sore. They might injure themselves. But so even when I start with clients who haven't done strength training in a while, we start with 5 or 10 minutes and then we build up from there. And we can do this on our own too. So I think just going back to the idea of what is the smallest thing I can start with that I feel ready to start with.
My son is 15 going to be 14, and he wanted to get more toned or toned at all, get some muscle mass. And so I was like, hey, I'm a personal trainer too. I can take you and we'll go together. So we're going together 3 times a week. And a little overachiever me sometimes did not, maybe I needed to hear you before I did this, but I take him 3 days a week and we do it for an hour. And I immediately had him do like 10 exercises in like those 2 or 3 muscle groups each time, which he's been doing great. And he's just starting out exercising, and his form, I love him, but is terrible. And all of these things that I'm like, okay, maybe we should have started with the basics. So yes, I think that's very wise what you're saying. Just start small, not this all or nothing. And before I go into more tips on what we can do, do you mind if I ask just your story, like why you're passionate about this and why this matters to you? Like personally, how did you get there?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in health and fitness, even from a young age. That's sort of why I went into physical therapy when I was in college. And I even did personal training while I was in college for that. After I had 3 of my kids, and those 3 were little, it was overwhelming, just like we were just talking about. And it literally went back to this principle of I started with 10-minute workouts because I felt like I didn't have the time, taking care of the kids, feeding them, messes, cleaning up. It didn't seem like there was time. So I started with 10-minute workouts. And what triggered that was I remember going up a flight of stairs, and, I was like 30 at the time, and I was out of breath. Not terribly, but like, oh my goodness, like I'm out of breath going up a flight of stairs. Like, I don't want this, because what does this mean if I stay on this trajectory? It's just going to get worse and worse. So I started with a 10-minute workouts, really simplified nutrition. Like, how can I just eat more whole foods, real foods, not following a diet. And I started to get back in shape and started to feel better. So that has just helped me to be passionate about helping others do the same thing. Like, how can we make this a little more easier so that we can really live healthy lives? And I'm also really passionate about people being healthy as we're older. We see, most of us are probably seeing people around us having diabetes, heart disease, heart attacks, some of these things that are lifestyle preventable when we can fuel our body with real food, with protein, when we can move our body, when we can strength train and keep that muscle mass, preserve that muscle mass as we're getting older, we're going to be living such a higher quality life. And it's not what our culture, it's not even what our medical field talks about. Our medical field will treat your disease, but they're not really into the prevention of disease. And we have to really take that into our own hands to be able to prevent disease and really live a truly healthy life as we are aging and getting older, because lifestyle factors is huge when it comes to that.
Absolutely. That is your focus, because for a long time, I didn't feel like that was even a conversation. Like, it was so much like medical model, so much focus on disease. And that's actually a big part of why I approach even therapy the way that I do. It's so much less problem focused and more on solution focused or positive psychology.
Like, let's focus more on the quality of life and preventing disease instead of these other things, just putting a Band-Aid on it or over medicating or all of these things that we often do, or escapism, these unhealthy things that we go to manage our discomfort. Your podcast is all about beyond 40, and I'm just now getting into that part too. And I have already noticed, like, bit by bit, the slow decline in my body. And it's even more motivating to be like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Why I've cared, why I've done these things beforehand, but also so much more motivating so that I continue to move well and have that better quality of life, not just for me, but, everybody often talks about their why. Like, I want to be there for my grandkids, or I don't just want to be there for my grandkids. I want to be like playing with them at the water park. I want to be jumping in the river. I want to be doing the zip lines. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I think too. And I think that goes back to the quality of life. It's not just the quantity, how long you live, but that quality and what you can do with that time. And to be an active grandparent or active when you're in your 60s and 70s, that 80s, that is absolutely what I want to.
Definitely. My next question is balance between like calories and macros and doing something, especially with your diet, that is not like what I see with a lot of my clients, where it's shame-based, where it's so focused on what they're not, where it's, just it's sitting in that space where they're stuck and just shaming and shooting on themselves. That's what we call it. They shoot on themselves all the time.
Yeah.
But instead, like, that small movement towards something better. Like, let me share one other thing before you answer. I apologize for the word vomit. But it's like Pearson's law. Like, when you track something, you do better. So I think tracking is important. And yet sometimes people get overwhelmed by that too. And you talked about starting small, but what if somebody is ready for that next step of like taking it up a notch? What could that look like for them?
Yeah. So when it comes to nutrition, one, we want to be focusing on whole foods. And I think we know this, but we can easily get away from it when we're thinking we have to follow some diet or something. So one principle, how can we just eat more whole, real foods, getting lots of non-starchy vegetables and different things like that? So that's one principle. The second thing I like people to focus on is getting enough protein. So especially as we're getting older, our body has a harder time breaking down the protein that we eat. So we need a little bit more. We need that protein to build muscle mass. When we are sick or when we injured, our body uses that protein to rebuild our cells. So it's a very essential nutrient. So I think that could be a next small step. And that's what I have a lot of clients work on too, is just looking at their protein intake. Am I getting enough? Am I starting my day that is more high protein? Because American breakfasts tend to be high carb, and that's not how we want to start our day. It's not good for our blood sugar. So how can we start with more of a high protein breakfast? So they could count the protein. And especially with protein, you don't even need to like track it in an app if someone doesn't want to do that. You'll have to Google it and figure it, but it's easier with protein once you know, okay, this size of chicken is about 30 grams of protein, or I know 3 eggs is 21 grams of protein. You'll start to learn pretty quickly, and that puts you in a really empowering spot. So someone could start working on eating more whole, real foods, getting more protein in their day, and there's different calculations to use to have a protein goal. But someone could always start with just getting more. So maybe someone is only getting 60 grams of protein a day. Maybe they're going to aim for 80. Maybe in another month or two, they might aim for 100, depending on their body size and their goals. So you can start that way without being like too specific. And the third thing I like people to really focus on with nutrition is fiber, because fiber, we need it for our gut health. Our gut health rules so many different processes in our bodies. So can we get enough fiber through non-starchy vegetables and even like little powerhouse fiber foods, I like to call them, like raspberries, avocados are high, chia seeds. How can we get more of those in our diet? And again, they're going to come from whole, real foods. So I think those three things are easy things to start with when you're focusing on nutrition-wise without going into a diet. And the other thing, it goes also back to portion size. So a lot of us, as we get older, we're moving less. We might be exercising less. We might have lost some muscle mass. So that means our metabolism is going to be lower. We don't need as much food. And we get so out of touch with our body of when we're hungry, when we're full. You know, a lot of people, we go to emotional eating, whether that's bored, stressed, anxious, these different feelings that we eat for and become a habit. So we have to break that down. But we really also need to pay attention to that portion size and to those cues in our body. Am I hungry? As I'm eating, I want to get to that, I like to say 80% full. We don't want to actually be full and stuffed, but how can I get to that point of being satisfied? And also learning like, okay, that can last me a few hours or maybe longer, and knowing what that feels like and going more for those body cues instead of being against ourselves and shaming ourselves. And if we do overeat or we eat something we feel like we shouldn't, like, how can we move past that? Like, that's okay. And like, no food really has to be off limits. It goes back to that portion size. Like, can I have a piece of pizza and still stay on track? Probably, as long as I don't eat half a pizza. Maybe I'm going to eat a salad first or some different vegetables. Or what if I do eat more than I wanted? The only thing that's going to keep you in that cycle is feeling bad about that. But how can I make a plan? How can I process maybe some of those feelings that I was eating or what was going on so that doesn't happen again?
Yeah, I love that. There were so many great tips that you gave there. A couple thoughts on that is I recently started tracking my macros, and I haven't really done that before. I've been really resistant to it because I see the shame culture. So it's not about a weight focus, but it's just an awareness. So I wanted to try it out. And I have really loved, it was unanticipated benefits from it. Like, as you break it down, it's just like, oh, I had no idea I was eating so many fats because it's like in things I wouldn't have really thought about. Or I had no idea I was low in potassium. Or, you know, like you were talking about fiber or protein. Actually, protein, I don't eat a lot of meat. And so I thought that would be really low. And so far, I've been over on my protein every time when I was like, wait, what? So it's like, oh, okay, I'm doing so much better than I thought. I think often we assume that it's going to be so bad. And the opposite I found was true. Like, I'm doing a lot better in so many ways. And for the first time, I actually feel, I can't say for the first time, I love health too. So I've done a lot of different things to just experiment and try to take my health to an even further level for fun, not for like a shame thing, like I said. But I found in that so many times when we're eating, just like I mentioned before, it is that escapism. It is something that we do because we're bored or tired or angry or whatever it is. Pick your feeling. And I feel like I've been eating like I was like an elementary school kid. I just want to eat these things and only these things, and just very immature in our eating habits because we don't want to put parameters on things. And parameters can be really beautiful and good. And I'm not saying going overboard because there's danger there too. But I have found that it's been so much more fun than I thought to have that awareness and tracking these things and learning what you're talking about, like those hunger cues and how there's so many things that you can eat that are actually really, really great and delicious. And it's not detrimental, I guess I'm saying. I don't know if you've seen that yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key I heard from you is it's education, it's information. It's like, a lot of us don't even read food labels. Like sometimes I don't read every food label. And every once in a while I'll look at something and I'm shocked. Like, for example, we had these breakfast sausages and I'm thinking my kids are getting a good amount of protein. And when I actually read the label, it was like one round sausage. It was like 170 calories, was only 6 or 7 grams of fat, 6 or 7 grams of protein. And the rest of those calories were coming from fat. So it was high in fat and actually sort of lower in protein. So I think that's where tracking can be helpful, reading nutrition labels, so we can actually know what's in the food we're eating and become educated, because you will find that food affects how it fuels your body. It affects your mood. I mean, I've seen people who tend more towards feeling anxious and they've reduced or cut sugar down and they're like, wow, I feel so much better. I never knew that was linked. So when we can start to become aware of what we're eating and how they're affecting us, and sometimes as women, that might change as we're getting older and some of our hormones change. Like we may not handle a ton of carbs as well as we did when we were in our 20s. And we have to have that awareness of what's in food. And also, like you said, some of that stuff, like we really don't know till we read that label or we're tracking and we see all that information pop up.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you said that it's education and information. It doesn't have to go to this like, I have to be this size, I have to be this weight, I have to these things so I'll be acceptable and I'll love myself. Well, it's not that so much as information and a better way. I even hesitate to use that word better because that's like, it can go to the shame place too. But I see a time and again when clients improve their mental and emotional health, it is also linked very closely to physical health. So if they're exercising, if they're eating better, naturally their mental and emotional health improves so much. So I love it when my clients start exercising and caring about what they're eating. It's so powerful that, and I see that in their lives all the time. Well, just in closing, I know this time has gone so quickly, but I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. But I'm curious what you would say maybe are the 3 biggest mistakes clients make when it comes to trying to improve their health and maybe going about it in the wrong way.
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind is a lot of people get stuck in that all or nothing that I was mentioning, and they're doing it alone. So they feel like they have to do something and it falls off. And just that shame that you've been bringing up, you fall off in shame and then you feel bad about yourself. And then you're not taking that action you need to get back on track. And a lot of that starts when we try to start with something that isn't really something we can continue with. So we need to start with something that we actually take some quiet time and sit down. Like, is this something I can stick with? Is this something I can start right now in my life? And if we start from a starting place that we can actually do, that's going to make a big difference because we can become successful and it can take us out of that all or nothing. The other thing that brings to mind is just having support and accountability, especially if you're someone who has tried a bunch of things before and you feel like you're failing. Having a coach or a therapist or somebody to talk with can really be key because it can get you out of that shame cycle, especially if there's emotional eating. You can't just put a Band-Aid on that. You can't be like, I'm just not going to eat, Snickers anymore. Like, there's some deep-rooted emotional pieces that you need to take care of. And nobody wants to work on that. Like, can't I just do this instead? Because it feels really hard to work on some of those feelings and emotions. And it's like, what does that even look like? It's hard to see or imagine. But a lot of people who struggle with emotional eating that haven't been trying to work on that, but trying to figure out all these Band-Aids, that is still going to be a problem. And that is probably for them why different diets and programs have failed. They've been able to do for a little bit, but they fall back into those patterns. So you have to sort of treat that root cause of those problems when you're doing it. And I'll probably say the third thing is also just looking at our health holistically. So meaning that we have all these different pieces to our health. We have that mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, and thinking about the different areas of our life. For me, it's parenting, it's marriage, it's work, it's my extended family. We have all these different pieces to us. So sometimes we try to work on something and we're not really taking into account these other things going in on our life. So we have to look at our health holistically, thinking of all these different pieces and what do I have the bandwidth to do? What do I need to let go of? What do I need to change so I can take care of my health? And so we have to look at those other pieces that are getting in the way of us being able to take care of our health.
That is, let me recap that for the audience and tell me if I get any of that wrong. Don't do it alone. Like, have that support system. Beware of that all or nothing thinking. Start with something that's sustainable or that bite-sized thing that you can do, and get a coach if you need to, or whoever else that might be, to do some of that deep work so you're not white-knuckling it, but really getting to that core of things. I talk a lot about that on the podcast too. Like, those things don't just go away, and you can do those little Band-Aids, put those on, do whatever you want, but it's going to last. If it's going to be sustainable, then you can take that to the next level. And yeah, I love that. And then the last part was really have that big picture view, that holistic health. What can you let go of? Maybe what is too low potentially, like that needs more balance and more attention in your life. That could be anything from, financial health and wellness. It could be relationships. It could be, well, a whole plethora of other things in that wellness realm. But yeah, looking at that big picture, like what things are setting you back and what could you maybe give more attention to? Am I right about everything you said?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everyone has to decide where they are in their life and what they need to work on. And I think also, as you talked about that all or nothing, I'm also working on an EFT or tapping certification. And I'm sure you've seen this in your therapy or working with people, is sometimes people think they can't be released from something. Like, for example, maybe I'm always going to feel like I need a reward after work or something. But there is freedom. Like sometimes we can't see that for ourselves, and we have to work on that to be able to release it and then really be able to move forward in our health.
Oh, absolutely. And we use different vocabulary words and different approaches to different things. But yeah, I do things like trauma therapy, EMDR, hypnotherapy. Like there's EFT. There's all these things that we can do that address those underlying issues and are able to work through those so that we get to that core, like I was mentioning or recapping from what you said too. I very much appreciate the things that you shared with us today, those insights on how we can take it to that next level and kind of get unstuck, especially after the summer, before we go into the holidays. So I really appreciate it. And where can we find you if we want to learn more?
Yeah, so definitely check out my podcast, Healthy Beyond 40, and all the apps. And then I have a Facebook group called Healthy Beyond 40. That's a great place if you guys have health questions or anything like that you can ask. You can share posts for accountability or anything like that. And I'm also on Instagram under my name, Michelle Reichman.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for all of those tips and for helping us get into better habits. And we appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you so much.
Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, chances are someone else would too. Would you take 30 seconds to share this with a friend who's looking for greater family fulfillment? And while you're sharing, tell me what you think about the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It refuels me when I hear this podcast is helping you, no matter what your house or your hair looks like. I'll meet you back here every Monday and Thursday morning for more episodes. Until then.